today's presentation, we're going to talk about two things. The first is how to process our own grief, our own loss, and then we're going to transition into how to assist others in their grief and loss. I want to compare grief to a snowflake. And I know this sounds so contradictory, okay? Snowflakes are beautiful and delicate, while grief is heavy and dark. But bear with me. Yep, right slide, good. If I have two friends who have recently lost their spouse, and they come to me, and the first widow says, I had a great relationship with my father. I have a great relationship with God and Christ. Perhaps I didn't marry in the church. Maybe we struggled with codependency. We were just so close, so tight. I've lost my best friend, and so now I don't know what to do with my life. My world has stopped. The second widow may come to me and say, you know, I had a rough upbringing. My father was abusive, and it impacts the relationship I have with God and Christ. I had a great marriage until the very end. Maybe he became abusive. And so widow number one cannot go to widow number two and say, I know exactly how you feel. Because widow number one is mourning the loss of her best friend. She's struggling with codependency. The second widow is mourning a lot of different things. Maybe she's mourning the marriage she thought she was going to have and never did in the end. Right? So even though you have two women who have lost their husbands, it looks very different. And so the analogy of two snowflakes are not the same. No two grief is the same. So let's keep that in mind as we advance. Let's talk about this scripture for a moment here. Mary and Martha had gone to Christ. It's the same Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair. They went to the Lord and they said, our brother is dying. Lazarus is dying. So before I get into this, I want to say Jesus knew what he was doing. He was about to perform a miracle. In fact, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but to the glory of God. He knew he was going to resurrect Lazarus. It was a poignant action that he was about to take. However, he knew the end of the story, but he still wept. I don't know about you, but if I had the power and I was about ready to resurrect someone, I would be leaping for joy. I would be in such excitement. But Jesus stayed in the moment and he wept. So what I take from this is he doesn't suppress emotions. A lot of times in our Western world, we are taught to suppress and don't express, but Jesus showed us something different. He wept. I also want to look at the point that emotions are not wrong or bad. They can be if expressed poorly. But Jesus expressed even righteous, indignant anger, and he did it perfectly for us. So we can learn how to express our emotions, but we have to learn how to do that. I want to take this example quickly. A lot of times we look at Job and his friends and we think about how disastrous that story was, right? But they actually did something really, really well in the beginning that I want to focus on. They intentionally came together when Job was mourning. So number one, they showed up. That is so important in grief. We have to show up. The second point I want to make is they sat on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one said a word. Can we get comfortable in the uncomfortable? Right? Ecclesiastes talks about it's better to go to the house of mourning. I don't know about you, but it's hard to go to that place. It's uncomfortable. But as brothers and sisters, we have to get comfortable in those uncomfortable places. We have to show up, and we have to learn how to sit in silence. I'll share a few quick stories personally. Some of you know our story. 2017, we got hit by a tornado. We were home. It was very traumatic for our family. But what I remember, we had some of you in this room even, we had friends text us immediately wanting to show up. They were ready to show up, right there. Actually, I said, no, stop. I can't handle this. I don't know what to do. Stop. I pushed them away. It took a while for me to receive that, but that was my reaction. We'll talk about that a little later. The next morning, my husband was at the house trying to get some of our belongings, and his boss, who isn't converted, he showed up. He got in the house with my husband in the rubble. He found my wedding rings. He found our Bibles. He found our pictures. He showed up. He was comfortable in the uncomfortable. So from that lesson, a few months later, one of my best friends unfortunately lost her child, 2-year-old child. So before that, I knew how important it was to show up. So I sat in the hospital with her a few days, and a family member came up and in panic said, please don't leave. So we didn't. We sat there in silence. So the importance of showing up and getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. A quick moment here. Scripture is great, right? It's given for inspiration. It's given for hope. But I want to make a quick point that sometimes deep in our grief, Scripture doesn't take today's sorrow away. It doesn't erase it, and it doesn't take it away. So a lot of times we try to comfort out of Scripture. Please be careful with this. Some people can't receive it in the darkest of days. In the counseling world, we refer to trauma as big T, little t. And for today, I want to talk about our big G and our little g, our big grief, our little grief. Our big traumas are going to be rape. It's going to be our natural disasters. It's going to be betrayal in marriage. It's going to be our PTSD factors, right? Soldiers are not the only ones who struggle with PTSD. Lots of trauma causes PTSD. Our little t's can be public humiliation. That's very traumatic. A car accident. Big G's. The first, it's the loss of a primary individual in our lives. The loss of a marriage. Let me explain that. It can be multi-layered. So I counseled one young mom. I counseled her 3 years in a row. She came once, twice, every week consistently. And the second year, she says, Rebekah, why can't I get over this? It's just a divorce. And I said, now hold on. Let's talk about this. It's very complicated. First of all, your husband was unfaithful and left you with 2 children. He now is using, so he's struggling with substance use, and he's the shell of a man he used to be. He's not showing up for your children. So you're mourning the loss of being the role of a wife. You're mourning the loss for your kids. They don't have a father. You also are impacted socioeconomically. So your status now, you're living in poverty level. You have to live in low-income housing. So it's very multi-layered. You're grieving many things. It's not just a divorce. There's many layers to this. Little G's. Little grief can be the loss of our identity. Let's say I was a teacher for 30 years. I've retired. That's great. But now who am I? Right? So I'm losing my teacher identity. So a lot of times in life, even when our kids fly the coop and we're empty nesters, we're grieving our loss. We're grieving the change of our household. Another point I want to make, not all grief is traumatic, but grief can be traumatic. So when we start off in this physical life, we're going to grieve. It's part of our physical life. We're going to grieve. When I am 6 months old and my mom takes my pacifier or blankie away, I'm going to grieve that. There's an automatic grief that's going to kick in and start in our physical life. It amplifies as we get older. We lose those we love. Now, when it does become traumatic is when our loss is prematurely. It's very unnatural. That can be very traumatic. I do want to say life, however, should not have trauma in it. So trauma should not be a normalized part in our lives, although grief is. Does that make sense? Okay. A couple different types of losses. Transitional loss. Like I was saying, transitions such as a job loss, graduation, we have a baby, right? These are all transitions. We can grieve these little moments. Relationship loss, divorce, death, separation, the loss of our pets. Impact loss, this is our abuse, our rape, our violence, loss of masculinity, femininity in society, right? That's impactful. Intangible loss, this is going to be our trust, right? This is going to be our dreams and our hope for our future that's now dashed. Perhaps we had hopes for our children, and now that looks different. We can grieve that the future we thought our children was going to have, our child was going to have, no longer. We can grieve that. We can experience grief with a miscarriage, sense of safety, identity changes, sexual assault. Perhaps I've been raped. Someone took a piece of me away I wasn't willing to give. We can grieve that. Loss of our dreams for our future, loss of health. Perhaps we've recently been diagnosed with cancer, right? Our world has changed. We can grieve that. We've suffered an injury. Loss of income, right? So our social status is changing. Loss of intimacy. Sometimes we age. Well, we all age. It's not sometimes, it's inevitable. We're aging. Our intimacy with our spouse changes, right? Doesn't look the same. We can grieve that. Let's talk about our backpacks. We wake up every morning and put this thing on. Sometimes they're little pebbles, right? Little griefs, or little G's. Sometimes they're little medium-sized, larger rocks maybe. Other times, I'm going to set it over here. Other times, we're carrying boulders. If we've lost a loved one, it's a boulder. And we feel stuck under this boulder. So sometimes we have to figure out, how do we even crawl out from this? How do we even go on? How do we learn to stand again, let alone walk, and then run our race? So I want to take a moment. I want you, on the first paper, there's a little backpack with a square. I want you to take a moment, and I want you to actually draw your rocks. Draw your pebbles, draw your medium-sized rocks, draw your boulders, and label them for me. And I also want you to think about the unnecessary rocks you're carrying that we probably need to take out and set aside. That can be regret, that can be resentment, that can be shame, guilt. Think about the rocks. Go ahead, draw them and label them. I'll give you about 3 minutes. Okay, I know some of you are still working, but we're going to move quickly because there's a couple exercises here. So we'll move quickly. What I want you to understand is day to day, this is your backpack, right? When the tornado happened, we had all this love and support, but I looked at my husband and I said, out of all of this, it's just you and I, babe. We've got to put this backpack on. It's ours to carry. My parents can't carry it. My friend can't carry it. It's mine. So I want you to assess the rocks. Do you have to have them now? Maybe you do now. Maybe they are the boulders, but maybe eventually you'll be able to set it aside for maybe an hour. Maybe you'll pick it back up and not even realize it's in your backpack. That's okay. That's progress. But also be aware of what rocks are in there that you don't need to be carrying. If there's regret, guilt, shame, I think we got to take that to our Father and we got to work through some self-forgiveness. This whole weekend, the theme is run in faith. And it's basically, it's based on the book John Maxwell. He talks, it's called Running with the Giants. So he talks about these Old Testament biblical characters, right, that are in the stands. And so as we step onto the racetrack and we start to run our lap, they're in the stands, and one at a time, one will come down and run a lap with us. So perhaps Moses is running with us, and we gleaned from Moses his life lessons. It's a great book. I think it's super quick, super easy. Like, I think it took us an hour to read to our kids out loud. It's super easy. So I recommend reading that book if you can. But basically, he just talks about they come down and they run with us, right? They give us support for a little bit. It's important to note that God will provide the right support at the right time. It looks different. So when my friend was battling the loss of her daughter, it was very shortly after the tornado, so I was dealing with my family stuff, and I also felt compelled to show up for her. I felt very conflicted. So one morning I was getting ready to drop our kids off at school and go straight to the hospital, and my daughter had a meltdown. She clung to my leg, and I just thought, what am I going to do? So I dropped her off at school, but I had a conversation with a friend, and she said, Rebekah, you are not the sole supporter for your friend. God will provide the right people. And as a friend, right, I'm a therapist, so I'm very empathetic towards people, and that was so hard for me because I want to be there for everybody all the time, right? I can't. The reality is God is the one who provides. So I want to give you a little bit of freedom if you find yourself in that place, if you're the one coming down from the stadium, and sometimes that is our role. Sometimes we're the ones coming down running to provide the support, but it's not solely on us. I like this quote, it's unknown. Your journey is not the same as mine, and my journey is not yours. But if we meet on a certain path, may we encourage each other. Right? The snowflake analogy. Our grief is different. But showing up, right? When we show up and we meet each other, we provide that support. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, you're probably familiar with her grief stages of grief. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Now, this is not linear. So you are not going to process your denial and then you're good, and then you're going to hop over to anger and process it and you're good, and then you're going to hop over to bargaining and you're good. It doesn't work like that. In fact, let me show you real quick. It can be a hot mess. Right? It can be all over, and it can be 10 years down the road, sorry to say, and you're still going to be this thing. It's okay. For denial, I want to talk about a little bit of where our brains are. And our brains are saying, this cannot be happening. You're numb. You're in shock. Your world has stopped when everybody else's world continues to go. Right? I was deep in, I lost a family member, and I was deep in my loss, and we were driving on the way to the funeral, and a man was mowing his yard. And I thought, how dare him? I'm deep in my grief, and he's just living. That's what it feels like. Everybody's world should stop in your grief. Anger, why is this happening to me? Sometimes we misplace our anger. We project it onto other people, other things. It's part of our process. It's part of the nit and gritty of it. It's ugly. This is where grace is incredibly important. When others are grieving, we have to understand anger is part of it, and they're going to express it, and we have to be merciful. If we're the ones experiencing anger, we're going to process that in just a moment. It's important to understand our anger. What are we feeling and why? So that we can properly go to other people and say, I'm sorry it came out this way, but really this is what's going on. Bargaining, I'll do anything to change this. It's desperation. Depression, what's the point in going on? If we've lost our spouse, our best friend, it's so hard to go on. Why? Acceptance, it's not that everything's okay, but it's everything will be okay. That's a difference. It's not okay, but it will be. The wheel of emotions. This is a daily for me in my job. This is like, it's great. So the center of the wheel is our primary emotions. Happy, sad, let's see, surprised, bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, right? We branch out. So let's take anger for just a moment. Sometimes it may look like we're humiliated. It just comes out in anger. Or maybe we feel ridiculed, right? So that's what I say. Sometimes it comes out in anger, but there's a lot of other stuff underneath, which is where we're going next, the anger iceberg. So the tip of our iceberg is anger. It just comes out explosive anger, but underneath there's so much more. It's disappointment, hurt, betrayal, abandonment. Sometimes when we lose our spouse, we feel abandoned. So we're going to take a quick moment here. We're going to process our anger. So I'll go back to the wheel of emotions so that you can see what exactly am I feeling. So take a moment, think about your anger, and I want you to write down what's really underneath on your iceberg. Okay, these are things you can continue at home in your personal time. Let's talk quickly in our grief about our physiological reactions versus cognitive. For those of you that were here for Dr. Schreiber's message a little bit ago, it was fantastic. But let's talk a little bit about physiological. So that means our physical reactions. So in grief, I may wake up and feel all the things. That can be our hands are sweaty, we have heart palpitations, maybe we feel overwhelmed, maybe we see a difference in our weight loss, weight gain due to appetite changes. Let's see, what else did I have on here? Sleeping, right? In our grief, that changes our sleeping. So those are the physiological effects. But really the cognitive, let's talk about that for a minute. In the front part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, and that's what controls our logic and reasoning. A lot of times when we are in our grief or in a trial or in hardship, in emergency mode, and God so beautifully created our brains, that we jump into what's called our limbic system. And in that is a little amygdala. It looks like an almond. And what happens there is our fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so if we're not aware of what we typically do, I think it's important to assess that. When the tornado happened, my husband, he's a rock star, he fought. He picked up the phone. He was calling the engineer to deem our house a total loss. He was setting up a bank account for our insurance. He was fighting for us. I shut down. I froze. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to freeze through every hardship in life, but in that one, that's what I did. And I froze for months. So it's important to understand, are we a fighter? Do we freeze? Do we flee? What do we do in those situations? A lot of times in emergency mode, we get stuck there. We get stuck in the amygdala. And our cortisol levels, our stress levels get so maxed out that it increases our physiological responses. So your anxiety, your depression, all of that increases when our cortisol is maxed out. Now, in grief, how do you say, okay, cortisol, that's enough, right? That's tough. But that's where our deep breathing and some of the therapeutic responses, the holistic things, kind of tap back in here and calm us down. Deep breathing, if you guys don't utilize that, meditation, it's incredibly helpful for the brain. Okay, this is going to be our last little exercise, and then we're going to shift gears for a moment. This is the tangled ball of emotions. So again, sometimes it looks like abandonment. It could look like relief. It could look like rage, jealousy in someone else's life. So quickly with your crayons, color in if you feel any of those. And we'll be back in like 1 minute. With this grief ball, what I have my clients do is, I am a Christian therapist, so I like to incorporate that piece. But I have my clients take that and take it to God and say, please help me relinquish this rage that I'm feeling, and take it over and over and over until you feel like God has released you of that. When you feel released, shade it in with black. It's done. And so your whole ball, at the end of it, whatever was shaded, should be shaded in black, and you're done processing that emotion. So let's shift gears, right? We processed our own grief. Let's shift gears on how can we run alongside those who are grieving. What isn't helpful? Well, we know saying, I know exactly how you feel. That's something a lot of us do say. I know how you feel. Well, actually, we don't if we remember the snowflake, right? So the antidote to that is saying, I'm so sorry, I haven't experienced exactly what you're going through. Acknowledging the loss is different. Saying nothing out of fear of saying the wrong thing. We cannot forget the loss. We have to acknowledge it. Making it about your loss. We don't want to take our boulder and go put it on their shoulders. Don't make it about our loss. Set it aside for a moment and be present just in their loss. Forgetting the grief. We're called to walk alongside. We're called to bear. So if we're in prayer, we're not going to forget. When they show up at church, later on I say it's the elephant in the room. It's a boulder, guys. It is on their shoulders. And if we are fervently praying, we should not be forgetting about this. Judging their grief. Remember the snowflake. It looks different. What is helpful? We're going to show up and we're going to sit. Sometimes we think that our words are going to take the pain away. That's why we speak. There's nothing we can say or do that will take their loss away. This scripture I found in my grief one time. It's Psalms 102:4, and it says, my heart is stricken and withered like grass, so that I forget to eat my bread. How profound. Sometimes I overeat, right? And I gain weight. Other times I don't eat at all. In one of my worst griefs, I realized I picked up a baby, and I realized I had not eaten for 11 days straight. I couldn't even hold the baby. So I was like, okay, remind yourself to eat a cracker or a piece of fruit or something. My best practice, and I think it's important for you to find what works for you when we serve our neighbors, friends, family. My best practice, knowing this, some overeat, some undereat, I always make up a big batch of soup. I throw stock in there so that there's something hearty to it, and I show up with soup. I also show up with bottled water. I try to think of convenience. I show up with toilet paper because no one wants to go to the store and buy toilet paper when they're grieving. I also show up with paper products, paper plates, utensils, because again, no one wants to be doing dishes in their grief. So think about the convenience factor. I also had someone tell me in their grief that, and I'm guilty of this, I've done this, I show up with flowers, and that's a symbol of everything that's alive and vibrant when their family member is not. So again, some people want that, some people don't. We have to really be accommodating and try to get a feel. That's hard, right? That's hard, getting uncomfortable in these moments. Ask, right? So in my little grief, my little trauma, I didn't know what I needed. I shut it down, shut everybody down. I didn't know what I needed. So that's when you come back and you ask again, what do you need? What do you need? And eventually I could say, oh man, we're homeless and we found a home, but I need help moving in. And my friends showed up and they helped me move in. So ask over and over. Don't forget. Don't assume, right? A lot of times the year passes and we just assume they're fine. It's been a year. That's what society gives us. They give us 3 grievance days. Sorry, guys. 3 grievance days. And they say you should be over it. Doesn't work that way. The milestones, 3, 6, 12, 18 months. The second year tends to be the hardest year. The first year, we're numb, right? We're just going through it. The second year is hardest because the permanency sets in. We've gone through a whole year of anniversaries, birthdays, feast, holy days without our spouse or our child. And now we've done a whole year without them. And now it's really setting in. The second year is the hardest a lot of times. It's okay to say, I don't know how to help. I want to. What is helpful? Mention their name organically. If you know their loved one, mention their name. Now that is salve sometimes, to hear their name, that they're not forgotten. Don't judge the time frame and talk about the boulder that's entering the room. I just want to recap, no two grief is the same. Let's consider Jesus' example of expression and not suppression, but let's do it in the right way. So I failed to mention in our anger, if we've expressed it poorly, it is okay to go back and say, I expressed it this way, but I'm feeling uncertain about my future, and it just came out this way. It's important to go back and struggle with those heavy moments. The big G's, little G's, not all grief's the same. I keep saying that, not all trauma is the same. Not all grief is trauma, but it can be traumatic. Our backpacks, what weight do we need to set aside? And it is okay if you're carrying the rocks and you need to still carry them for a while. It's okay. But it's also okay to set the rock aside too and not feel guilty about it. The stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. It's not linear. And then we can always go to the anger iceberg. We can always go, I had a comment a little bit ago, I haven't felt anger. Is something wrong with me in my grief? Absolutely not. You process it differently, right? We're going to process it differently. So if you're not feeling one of these stages, it's okay. But anger is one that a lot of people do feel, and that's okay. And then just remember what is helpful versus what isn't helpful. And then the point is that we grow in grace and knowledge. So please, as you go forward, encapsulate, what we talked about today in processing your grief, but also trying to grow and walking alongside others in theirs. Thank you.